Alec's heart pounded as the lights in the hallway suddenly cut out, plunging the house into darkness. This break-in was supposed to be an easy score, just a frail old man living alone. Instead, he and his friends were now caught in a deadly game of cat and mouse inside the creaking house. Miles cursed under his breath, his earlier cocky grin gone. Jaden's hands trembled on his flashlight as its beam slashed through the darkness. From somewhere in the shadows, a calm, low voice echoed through the halls, sending a jolt of fear through the intruders. "Is this what you were looking for?" the voice asked, almost polite in its tone. Alec tightened his grip on the crowbar, trying to pinpoint where the sound had come from. The old man was nowhere to be seen, but his presence was unmistakable. He was watching them, stalking them in the dark of his own home. Alec sneered, attempting to sound unafraid. "Come on out, old man," he shouted into the emptiness, but the waver in his voice gave him away. His taunt was met with silence, save for a faint electrical hum in the walls. Suddenly, a series of soft clicks echoed from the walls as hidden locks engaged. The three intruders exchanged anxious glances. In the dim light, Alec saw sweat beading on Miles's forehead. Jaden swallowed hard, fear growing in his eyes as he whispered, "Guys, something's not right." Before Jaden could finish, a heavy thud sounded from the front door, as if a bolt had slammed shut on its own. Miles dashed to the front door and yanked at it frantically. "It's locked! How?" he stammered, his voice cracking with panic. They were sealed in. At that moment, Alec realized they had underestimated their prey. This was no ordinary old man. They had walked straight into the lair of someone who had anticipated their every move. With adrenaline surging and no way out, the intruders huddled back to back in the near dark. Somewhere in the house, Harold M. Quinn, the man they thought would be an easy target, was already 2 steps ahead, quietly setting the stage for their reckoning. For everyone who has ever been underestimated, watch closely. This is where justice begins. Subscribe now to join us. Earlier that evening, in Bridgeport, Connecticut, the cold wind whistled through an almost deserted blue-collar neighborhood. Street lights flickered, and most homes sat dark and quiet. In a small, worn house at the end of the block, 70-year-old Harold M. Quinn eased himself into a threadbare armchair. He rubbed his aching knees and gazed at the old family photos on the mantel. To any passerby, Harold was just another tired widower, settling in for a lonely night of television. Neighbors knew him as a quiet, harmless old man who fed the stray cats and never caused trouble. But behind Harold's gentle, unassuming demeanor lay a lifetime of secrets. Decades ago, in the 1990s and early 2000s, Harold had served as an operative in the FBI's Field Operations Unit, undertaking dangerous missions that never made the news. He was an expert in operational psychology, skilled at reading people, using environments to his advantage, and manipulating enemies into mistakes. He had hoped those skills would never be needed again. After his beloved wife passed away, he returned to this humble Bridgeport neighborhood, seeking peace and quiet in retirement. Lately, however, peace had been hard to find. A string of break-ins had hit the area over recent weeks. Harold heard the rumors at the corner store. Young thieves were targeting the elderly, figuring they'd be easy marks. As he sipped his evening tea, Harold's sharp eyes drifted to a security monitor, cleverly disguised as an old radio on a shelf. The feed showed his front porch and the empty street beyond. He had fortified his home in subtle ways: silent magnetic locks on the doors, motion sensors in the hallways, a few repurposed surveillance cameras, and traps hidden in the walls. He told no one of these precautions. It was his insurance, a quiet preparation for a day he prayed would never come. Down the street, in a narrow alley, 3 figures huddled under the weak glow of a broken streetlight. Alec, Miles, and Jaden peered toward Harold's house from the shadows, plotting. Alec, 19 and brimming with swagger, smirked as he nodded toward the house. "That old man lives there alone," he whispered. "Bet he's got something valuable stashed away. Easy pickings." Miles, an 18-year-old tech whiz, patted the homemade signal jammer in his hand with a grin. "That old alarm system will be a piece of cake," he whispered. Jaden, the youngest at 17, shifted uncomfortably at the back of the trio. He bit his lip. "Are you sure about this? He's old. Feels kind of wrong," Jaden murmured, his conscience making a last stand. Alec shot him a hard look and scoffed. "Don't go soft on us now. The old man won't even know what's happening. We'll be in and out before he can find his glasses." The other two chuckled, though Jaden's weak laugh faded quickly. In their eyes, Harold was an easy target, ripe for the taking. For everyone watching, what do you think about what these boys are planning? If you were in Harold's position, how would you protect your home against intruders? Share your thoughts in the comments. Around 10:30 p.m., clouds swallowed the moon, and the neighborhood lay in heavy darkness. Harold stood in his small kitchen washing the last of the dinner plates when he heard it, a faint click at the front door lock that made his heart rate spike. He froze for a split second, mind instantly alert. Gently setting the plate aside, Harold reached into a kitchen drawer and retrieved a small, unmarked remote. His thumb hovered over a single button. All those nights of quiet preparation came down to this moment. In the silent living room, the front door latch gave way with a soft clack. 3 shadowy figures slipped into the house, their footsteps light and predatory. Harold exhaled slowly and pressed the button. The trap was set. The hunters had just become the prey. The intruders froze in confusion as Harold's secret defenses sprang to life. At the press of that single button, the house itself seemed to awaken. Hidden magnetic locks thudded into place inside the walls, sealing every door and window. Alex spun around, realizing the front door they'd entered through was now firmly shut and bolted by an unseen mechanism. Overhead, lights went out, plunging the foyer into darkness, while dim tactical LEDs along the baseboards flickered on, casting eerie shadows. A low, rhythmic beeping crackled over an old speaker hidden somewhere, followed by a burst of garbled radio static. To Alec, Miles, and Jaden, it felt like they'd stepped into some kind of nightmare, an abandoned battlefield where the enemy was everywhere and nowhere. "Spread out! Find the old freak and make him stop this!" Alec hissed, fighting to keep his voice steady. He refused to admit, even to himself, that he was scared. Miles obeyed immediately, dashing off toward the kitchen where he guessed the security system controls might be. Jaden lingered near Alec, not wanting to be alone until Alec shoved him toward the back of the house. "Check the windows and back door. See if there's a way out," Alec ordered harshly. Jaden's throat was bone dry, but he nodded and crept down the hallway toward the rear. Alec remained in the central living room, gripping his crowbar with sweaty palms and darting his eyes around frantically for any sign of the old man. Miles found an alarm keypad on the kitchen wall, an older-looking panel that seemed ripe for tampering. He let out a sigh of relief, thinking he could override whatever was happening. "I've got it. Just a second," he called out to Alec. With shaking fingers, Miles pried off the keypad's cover using a multi-tool from his pocket, revealing a bundle of wiring. The faint red glow of his headlamp danced across the circuit board as he began cutting and splicing wires. He was confident he'd have the lights back on and the locks disengaged in no time. In his haste, Miles didn't notice that the alarm panel itself was one of Harold's traps. Meanwhile, Alec edged toward the base of the staircase and shouted into the darkness, trying to sound fearless. "Come out, old man," he bellowed, but his voice trembled slightly. The only response was a crackle of static from a hidden speaker overhead. The old house groaned in the silence, and Alec's heart thumped even harder. He had to stay in control, but fear was closing in. In the back rooms, Jaden's flashlight beam quivered as he moved down the hall. He peered into one bedroom and felt his blood run cold. The walls were covered with old photos, documents, and maps. Some faces in the pictures had red X's over them. City maps were marked with ominous circles and notes. One faded photo even showed a younger Harold shaking hands with FBI agents. Jaden's stomach flipped. "Who is this guy?" he thought. Dread creeping in, he staggered back into the hallway, realizing the quiet old man they'd targeted was anything but helpless. Back in the kitchen, Miles thought he had finally cracked the system. "Almost there. Gotcha," he whispered, twisting two wires together. The instant he did, a hidden capacitor unleashed a jolt of electricity through the panel. Crack! A blue arc of current burst from the wires with a vicious spark, and Miles was flung backwards with a yelp. He crashed onto the linoleum floor, the tool clattering from his hand. A searing pain shot up his arms as if he'd grabbed a live electric fence. The acrid smell of burnt plastic filled the air. Miles groaned, dazed and unable to move, his muscles twitching from the shock. Hearing that crack in Miles' cry, Alec felt a stab of panic. "Miles! Miles!" he called out, voice rising. No answer, only a low moan and the faint sizzle of fried electronics came from the kitchen. Alec's mask of confidence shattered. In minutes, this simple burglary had become a disaster. With Miles down and silent and Jaden out of sight, Alec realized he was effectively on his own. His mind raced with a single desperate thought. Get out. Now, "Jaden, we're leaving," Alec shouted, his tone betraying outright fear. To hell with the score. They needed to escape with their skins intact. Frantic, Alec sprinted to the back door leading to the yard. To his surprise, it stood slightly open as if inviting him to freedom. Cold night air wafted in. Alec's eyes lit up with hope. He didn't stop to question why this one door was ajar when everything else was locked down. Maybe Jaden had managed to crack it open. Either way, he wasn't about to look a gift horse in the mouth. Alec could make out Jaden's silhouette emerging at the end of the hallway, eyes wide in confusion. "Come on, this way!" Alec barked, gesturing urgently. Without waiting, Alec barreled toward the half-open door, intent on bulldozing through it and getting as far away from this house as possible. But Harold Quinn was 2 steps ahead. The moment Alec lunged at that exit, a hidden mechanism triggered with a sharp whir. The heavy back door slammed shut with astonishing force, powered by an automatic piston. Alec had already committed to his leap. He couldn't stop. The door crashed into the frame with Alec's right arm and shoulder caught in between. "Ah!" Alec's scream tore through the house as pain exploded in his arm. The crowbar dropped from his grip with a clang. He found himself wedged in the doorway, half inside and half outside, his arm crushed and immobilized by the door that refused to budge. "No, no, let me go, let me go!" Alec howled, kicking uselessly at the floor in agony. He was trapped like an animal. Jaden skidded into the kitchen just in time to witness his fearless leader's fate. The sight of Alec, cocky, unbreakable Alec, now writhing and screaming, pinned helplessly by a door, broke something in Jaden's mind. The adrenaline, the fear, the guilt, all of it crashed over him. In the span of minutes, his friends had been utterly defeated. Miles lay somewhere in the dark, groaning, and Alec was literally caught in a vice. This was no game. They could die here tonight. Jaden's vision blurred with tears as he raised his shaking hands. "Please, we're sorry, he cried out, voice cracking. The knife he'd been clutching slipped from his fingers and thudded to the floor. Jaden fell to his knees right there on the kitchen tiles, sobbing openly in surrender. Behind the walls, Harold observed through tiny hidden cameras and listened via the acoustic sensors he'd installed. Jaden's pleas echoed through the house. For a brief moment, something in Harold's chest twinged at the genuine terror in the boy's voice. These were young fools, not hardened killers. Still, he couldn't afford mercy just yet. Harold stayed in the shadows, ensuring both Alec and Jaden were in his line of sight. 2 intruders were neutralized, but he had to be sure the threat was over. Alec continued to thrash and curse, tears of pain in his eyes, but he wasn't going anywhere. Miles's groans had gone quiet in the other room, and Jaden knelt, pale and shaking, repeating, "I'm sorry," like a broken record. The house was filled with a heavy, charged silence now, broken only by Alec's ragged breathing and Jaden's stifled sobs. If you want to see Harold's brand of justice delivered to the very end, don't go anywhere and consider subscribing now. In that silence, slow, measured footsteps approached from the dark hallway. Jaden hiccuped mid-sob and turned his head. From the shadows, the old man emerged at last. Harold's stooped figure now stood tall and imposing, and he no longer carried his wooden cane. In his right hand, Harold held a sleek black pistol equipped with a silencer. The faint glow of the emergency lights gleamed on the metal. He moved with deliberate calm into the kitchen, placing himself between Jaden and the still struggling Alec. Jaden's breath caught in his throat. Up close, Harold no longer looked like a vulnerable senior citizen. His previously tired eyes were sharp and cold, and his hands holding the gun were steady as rock. Alec, caught in the door, finally fell silent as he locked eyes on the weapon in Harold's grip. In their stunned faces, Harold saw the recognition. The trap was complete, and he was the one in control. For a moment, Harold simply stood in the middle of the chaos, surveying what he'd wrought. One intruder lay unconscious in the next room, another was whimpering and pinned in a doorway, and a third knelt on the kitchen floor sobbing for mercy. The only sounds were Alec's pained gasps and Jaden's quiet cries. In the distance, rising over those sounds, came the growing wail of police sirens. Whether alerted by Harold's silent alarm or a neighbor's frantic call, help was on its way. Alec, still trapped in the doorway, glared at Harold with a mix of pain and rage. "Yeah, you're insane. Who the hell are you?" he spat out hoarsely, sweat and tears mingling on his face. Never in his wildest dreams did he think this feeble old man could be so formidable. Harold stepped closer, pistol in hand and utterly composed. He looked down at Alec, tilting his head slightly. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and low, almost regretful. "I'm the man who saw you coming before you ever walked through that door," Harold said quietly. His words sent a chill through Alec's blood. Harold's steely gaze bore into the young man. "You thought this house was an easy target. You thought I was easy prey." He let that hang in the air a second. Alec's eyes flashed with confusion and fear. Harold continued, his voice never rising. "I only carried that cane to fool you. Now do you understand what you walked into?" Alec's mouth hung open, but no retort came. The fight drained out of him, leaving only dull comprehension. He finally understood. Harold had planned everything. A choked whimper escaped Alec's throat as he averted his eyes. Just a few minutes ago, he had felt so powerful, and now he felt utterly small. Jaden, still on his knees a few feet away, nodded weakly through his tears as if to answer on Alec's behalf. He understood exactly what Harold meant. They had picked the worst possible house to rob. Red and blue lights flashed outside as police cruisers screeched to a halt. The authorities, alerted by Harold's silent alarm and the commotion, poured into the house to a scene of utter astonishment. 2 officers rushed in, guns drawn, shouting commands, only to pause at the sight before them, an elderly man standing firm with a pistol and 3 young men incapacitated around him. Harold immediately set his weapon on the floor and raised his hands, not wanting any accidents. "It's my house," he said steadily to the stunned officers by way of explanation. Within minutes, the intruders were securely in custody. The police pried the door off Alec's crushed arm and dragged him, cursing and wincing, to handcuffs. They pulled Miles from the kitchen floor. He was conscious again, but too weak to resist as they restrained him. Jaden offered no resistance whatsoever. He practically crawled to the officers, still mumbling apologies as they cuffed his shaking hands behind his back. One officer handed Harold his cane. As Harold accepted it, his shoulders slumped ever so slightly, and the mask of a harmless, tired old man fell back into place. He gave the officer a polite nod of thanks. The young cop couldn't help but marvel at the transformation. The fierce figure who had held a gun moments ago now just looked like someone's grandfather ready for bed. Outside, the police led the 3 perpetrators to separate squad cars. Alec bit back a scream as his injured arm was jostled. His bravado was long gone, replaced by sullen silence. Miles hung his head, still dazed and twitching from the shock, while officers read him his rights. In the 3rd car, Jaden stared at Harold through the window with red, puffy eyes. His lips quivered as he shouted one last tearful, "I'm sorry," before the door closed and muffled whatever else he tried to say. Harold watched without expression from his porch as the trio who had invaded his home were driven away to face justice. After giving a succinct statement to a detective, Harold was as brief and modest as ever. The police assured him that an ambulance was coming to check him and the intruders, and that he was safe now. Neighbors gathered on their porches and lawns despite the late hour, murmuring in disbelief at what had unfolded. Harold offered them a weary wave to show he was all right. He had never been one for the spotlight, and tonight was no exception. Once the flurry of activity died down and the last cruiser pulled away, Harold stood alone in the quiet street. The adrenaline of the confrontation ebbed and a deep weariness set in. he stepped back into his house, his sanctuary, now littered with evidence of the struggle: a shattered lamp, scuff marks, and a few drops of blood on the floorboards. Harold gently righted a fallen dining chair. His eyes then caught a framed photograph on the wall, one of him from decades ago in an FBI uniform, shaking hands with colleagues. The glass was cracked, likely knocked off kilter during the chaos. Harold carefully straightened the frame with a trembling hand. In the photo, his younger self looked strong, confident, full of purpose. He allowed himself a thin, proud smile for just a second. That night, 3 reckless youths learned a lesson they would never forget. They set out to prey on someone they thought was weak and defenseless, only to discover they had picked the wrong house and the wrong man. They discovered, too late, that you should never judge a person by their appearance, because some of the strongest people wear the most unassuming faces. Harold had spent years trying to leave his old life behind, but fate had other plans. All the training, all the instincts from his FBI days were still there, waiting beneath the surface. When his home was threatened, those skills sprang back to action as if no time had passed at all. Some people never really forget. They just wait. Harold had waited, and when the moment came, he protected what mattered without hesitation. Appearances can be deceiving. Harold's story shows that true strength often hides in silence. Justice arrived that night in an unexpected form, not with loud vengeance, but with the quiet, methodical resolve of a man who refused to be a victim. As Harold finally turned out the lights and headed to bed, he felt a deep sense of peace. The ordeal was over, and his street was safe again. In the quiet that remained, an unspoken lesson hung in the air. Never underestimate the quiet old man at the end of the block.